All right, so this week we're going to open our first gallery show of the year. It's photography by Osinski. She received a BFA degree from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, very fancy, and an MFA from Yale University, kind of sort of fancy. She currently teaches at the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art in New York City and lives in the New York metropolitan area. 30 years ago, Ms. Osinski took her photographic approach to wandering the forgotten borough of Staten Island. The work was featured on Time magazine's website in 2012, but has otherwise gone unseen. With the Pollock-Krasner grant that she received, allowing for a book to be published, the work gets its due. We will have copies available for sale in the gallery for this month. Her photographs can be found in the collections of the Museum of Modern Art, the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, Portland Art Museum, Oregon, La Bibliothèque Nationale, Paris, the Fogg Art Museum at Harvard University, the Museum of the City of New York, the New York Public Library, and in numerous other museums. Photographs and reviews of her work have appeared in the Times, the New Yorker, the Boston Globe, the Wall Street Journal, Photograph Magazine, Time Magazine, Art on Paper, New York, just all over the place. Would you please welcome Osinski?
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here at Taft. So the work I'm going to show today is from this book that I recently published maybe about 18 months ago. I tend to work on projects that are close to home. And if you're a writer, if you're a photographer, or if you're some type of creative person, you don't have to love your subjects. You don't have to even like your subjects necessarily. You have to be fascinated with them. And I don't necessarily mean people, anything that you're dealing with as a creative person. You have to have some type of fascination. And I suppose, although math and science are my weak points, I suppose that would apply to math and science as well. To either be curious about something or to be fascinated about something. And as a creative person, all of us seek territory that we can kind of claim as our own. Sometimes it's a geographical location, or a particular subject. Some people travel very far to find what they want to talk about. But each of us has a very special portal because of our experiences, and often because of our experiences when we were growing up. We have a special portal into some part of the world. The work I'm about to show you is my slow reckoning with that part of myself, which I tried to disguise for a long time. We all lead interesting lives, but we sometimes fail to see what's directly in front of us. And even if we see what's directly in front of us, we often don't value that. We don't value what's closest or think of it as something of interest, but that's what we really know best. So, okay, let me get my little, see if I can do this right. So, my husband and I lived in Manhattan for a long time, my husband's an artist, and we lost our loft, looked for a place to live, moved to Staten Island, and I thought, what kind of work am I going to do here? So all of this work started from wandering around Staten Island, trying to discover what this place was. And I thought, while I'm wandering around, I might as well carry my camera. So I carried a big camera, a 4x5 camera, which gives a negative that's 4 by 5 inches, tripod, film holders, dark cloth. I looked like a curious itinerant photographer, and I would walk around, focus, set the camera up, focus, and then not be looking through the camera when I took the picture. So in order to get this picture, the camera is standing there, and this young woman kept going back and forth, mowing the lawn, and I made a really loud noise. So she'd turn around, and I took the picture. The first pictures I took were, the people were very small in a bigger landscape, but what I noticed right away about Staten Island is that, first of all, it is an island, and you have a feel about it when you're there of being just left alone, that you could kind of do whatever you want. But there were always a lot of people outside trying to fix things, trying to make things work. And so, let me just go back. When I said you don't have to love something, I wouldn't necessarily want to live in that house, but it's totally fascinating to me. And it was important for me to take a direct look at what was there, not deal with it ironically or critically, but just accept what's there. This is a little boy pointing a rifle at a car. So in all of the pictures that I've shown up to this point, I never even talked with the person I was photographing. I would be just there with this camera, big camera on a tripod, take a picture and move on. I never talked with this woman. And then I did. And then I began to ask people directly as I began to approach individual people. All the people I photographed were strangers to me. I saw them once, I took their pictures, and I never saw them again. So I do think that the fact that I was photographing strangers, not people I knew, definitely contributed to part of the quality of the work. And these must look ancient to all of you because nobody fixes cars anymore. You take them in. This guy's changing the oil in his car. So Staten Island is called the Forgotten Borough for a reason. First of all, you can only get there either over a bridge or by the ferry. There's no subway. And it's a very blue-collar part of the city. And I come from a working-class background on the south side of Chicago. So I noticed something while I was walking around, that the place, the people seemed very familiar to me. Chicago does not look this way, but it seemed curiously familiar. There were a lot of, I would walk around in the afternoons, late afternoons mostly. There were a lot of, over 2 summers, all the work was taken just in the daytime over 2 summers. And there were obviously a lot of kids hanging out. And not all that many adults. I think in looking at this picture, I could tell what they looked like as adults. People seemed very willing to have their picture taken by me, and I think in part because it was a very curious, I looked curious. I had this big camera with a dark cloth, a tripod, and I think also the times were somewhat different. So, in this picture and in some of the others, I do think there's a kind of edge to the pictures. I wanted the pictures to be kind of open, the space to be open, clean, not too pretty, not ironic, but definitely with a direct look. And I think the bat in the picture kind of contributes to, the edge quality. Lots of kids on bikes. So I think when you do work, every time I went out to take pictures, I would tell myself, all I need is one good picture. All I want is one good picture. And I was never disappointed because it was kind of a gold mine for me. I would walk around and I didn't really have a plan thinking I'm going to make a definitive essay, photographic essay about this place called Staten Island. It wasn't that. It was more like a series of notes and wanderings. And as I proceeded over the 2-summer period to do this work, I began to find relationships in the work that I didn't have to impose on the work, but it was already there. There was a small group of children, these two with a couple other ones that I photographed more than once, but they were the only people I photographed more than once. It's the same little girl on the right who was on the car. So it was important for me to kind of stay out of the work in a way, not to impose my political leanings or say, I prefer these people, don't like those people, or, this is what I really like. The pictures are not really about liking or not liking. They're more about being fascinated, I would say. So I photographed anything on any day as I went out. So it wasn't even that I would go out thinking I was going to take portraits, but the architecture was very interesting as well. A lot of new building at that point, and people seemed to prefer the new buildings, but the new houses always seemed so sad to me. The older houses that people fixed up always seemed to have much more character in a way. This is for a housing development, Forest View Estates, and of course there's not a tree in sight. it had to have been a forest at one point. In this picture, I did ask the woman who was sitting in the chair on the lawn if I could take a picture of her house, and she said yes. And without my realizing it, her husband came around the house and started making motions for the dog to jump up. So a lot of times, things happened that were really fortuitous in terms of taking pictures. I never would have, I don't think the dog would have done that without the man. Again, we never spoke. He just kind of came around and did that. I began to seek out activities. This is a family who were part of a neighborhood block party. I went to the beach a lot. It's a young guy flexing. I'm glad you're laughing. There is a certain humor to the pictures. I am not making fun of anybody, but the houses, there's a humor to the quality, I think, of the pictures, and that's important for me. I think humor is a very underrated quality. It's hard to make work that has a humor without poking fun at anybody. Oops. This one's not in the book, but there was a small circus that came. There's a small, little amusement park that had the crummiest rides. But anyway, this is a guy hanging out at an amusement park. The 4th of July. And the thing about using a big camera, again, you're not looking through the camera when you actually take the picture. So all the design or the way you organize the picture becomes really important. So the stripes in the road, the monument of the soldier who seems to want to flee his post. He seems to be running away. The stripes on the flag, the stripes on the telephone wires and the telephone pole, I think all kind of contribute to it. Memorial Day. And a family having a picnic on a very windy day. This is the last picture in the book, and I chose it because, to me, it felt important that you could see how the wind is really blowing. It was a very, very blustery day, and the fact that these people are standing, and they obviously seem either like immigrants or working class people. The kind of the harshness of it and the fact that they're solid was very important to me. I wanted to go back, well, I can't do that. I wanted to go back, if possible, to the first slide. In terms of fortuitous things happening, you have to, especially when you're taking pictures, you can't always control everything. And so sometimes you have to let things happen, and a lot of times they don't work out. But in this case, I think if you look at the young woman cutting the grass, the fins on the Cadillac and her rear end, the way her hair is falling, the edges of her hair, and the way the branches and the leaves of the trees fall seem to kind of echo each other. And those things are not things that you set up, but they can just happen. And sometimes I think that a person is not really responsible for their best work, but it just is there, or it's fortuitous. So if I can sort of sum up, when I looked at these pictures, when I did them, I saw myself in them, and I saw that this was a place that I really understood very well because of where I came from. And it was a part of myself that I really didn't wish to show. When I was an undergraduate student, I went to art school, and I could tell which kids were from the suburbs who were dressing down, trying to look like they were from the city. So I had this idea that I was going to look like I was from the suburbs who was dressing down to look like she was from the city, which was totally crazy. And of course, it never worked. But in wandering around Staten Island, the work finally wore me down, because I would see it and I'd go, oh, I know this. This is familiar to me. This person is like my cousin. So along with the weight of this big camera that I carried around, I was also carrying the weight of my own personal history and bringing it to the pictures as well. Photographing Staten Island was a major step in coming to terms with myself and my working class roots. I tried to avoid what I knew best, but it kept tapping me on the shoulder until I finally gave in to it. The very thing that I wished to avoid ended up being my strength. So I don't know how we are on time. Is that okay?